The screaming started before Simone Carter even smelled the smoke. 8 months pregnant and trapped in the back of a burning limousine, she pressed her hands against the bulletproof glass that had once made her feel safe. Now it was her prison. The electronic locks had malfunctioned when the car's electrical system caught fire, and her husband David had already run. She'd watched him through the flames, watched him look back once, see the growing fire and make his choice. He kept running. "Help me!" Simone screamed until her voice cracked, her hands pounding against the windows. The baby kicked violently inside her, sensing her terror. Heat pressed against her face like an angry fist. The leather seats began to smoke. She thought about Amara, Jerome's 8-year-old daughter who called her Mama Simone, and braided her hair every Sunday morning. She thought about the nursery they'd painted yellow because they wanted to be surprised. She thought about all the dreams burning up with her in this metal coffin. The fire spread faster now, licking at the roof. Simone pulled her dress over her nose and mouth, but the smoke was everywhere. Her lungs burned. The baby's kicks grew weaker. Then she heard footsteps running toward the car, not away from it. Jerome Carter had been walking home from another failed job interview when he saw the limousine skid off Henderson Boulevard and slam into the concrete barrier. The car's front end crumpled, sparks flying from the engine. He was still a block away when he saw smoke rising, then flames. His security training kicked in before his brain could catch up. He sprinted toward the burning vehicle, not knowing that inside was the wife who had divorced him 6 months ago, the woman who had chosen David's money over his love. All Jerome saw was someone who needed help. The driver's door hung open, but the man who should have been helping was nowhere in sight. Jerome grabbed the door handle and yanked, but the electronic locks held firm. Through the smoke-stained glass, he saw a pregnant woman collapsed against the far window. His ex-wife. The shock nearly stopped him cold. Simone's eyes were closed, her head tilted back. She wasn't moving. For a moment, every hurt, every sleepless night, every time Amara had asked why Mommy Simone didn't live with them anymore crashed over him like a wave. But then the baby kicked and Jerome saw Simone's belly move. He grabbed a chunk of concrete from the broken barrier and slammed it against the window. Again. The glass spiderwebbed but didn't break. The flames were spreading toward the back seat now. "Come on!" Jerome roared, tears streaming down his face from the smoke and something deeper. He hit the window again with everything he had. The glass finally shattered. Jerome reached through, unlocked the door and pulled Simone's unconscious body into his arms. She was heavier now, her belly round and full with another man's child, but she felt exactly like she had on their wedding day when he carried her over the threshold of their tiny apartment. He ran with her as the limousine exploded behind them, the force knocking them both to the ground. Jerome rolled, protecting Simone's belly with his own body as burning debris rained down around them. When the sirens arrived 3 minutes later, they found Jerome Carter giving mouth-to-mouth resuscitation to his ex-wife while her husband's limousine burned to nothing behind them. David never came back. Denise Washington Price stood in the hospital corridor at 2 a.m., her usually perfect hair pulled back in a messy bun, her designer suit wrinkled from hours of sitting in uncomfortable plastic chairs. She shouldn't be here. She'd fired Jerome Carter 3 weeks ago for missing work after his daughter got sick, and she'd specifically told HR that Henderson and Associates had a zero-tolerance policy for unreliable employees. But here she was, because the man she'd called unreliable had just saved a woman's life while her own husband ran away. Mrs. Washington Price? Dr. Patricia Mills emerged from the ICU, her surgical scrubs still damp with sweat. "You're here about Simone Carter?" Denise nodded, though she couldn't quite explain why. "I saw it on the news. Jerome, the man who saved her, he used to work for my company." Dr. Mills studied her with tired eyes. "That man is a hero. His ex-wife has severe smoke inhalation and second-degree burns on her arms and legs. The baby..." She paused. "We had to do an emergency C-section. 28 weeks. It's going to be a fight. Will they make it? Simone will recover. The baby..." Dr. Mills shrugged. "Premature babies born after trauma have a harder road. But Jerome hasn't left the NICU. He's been talking to that baby for 6 hours straight, telling him stories about his big sister. Him. A boy." Denise felt something twist in her chest. She'd built her career being tough, making hard decisions, cutting loose anyone who couldn't keep up with her demanding schedule. She'd never looked back at the single parents she'd fired, the employees who struggled to balance work and family. She'd never wondered what happened to them after. "Can I see Jerome?" Denise asked. Dr. Mills looked surprised. "He's not expecting company. Are you family?" "No," Denise said quietly. I'm the person who made his life harder when it was already hard enough. The NICU hummed with machines and whispered conversations. Jerome sat beside an incubator, his large hands pressed against the glass, talking softly to a baby so small he could fit in Jerome's palm. Tubes and wires covered the tiny body, monitoring every breath. His name's going to be Justice, Jerome was saying. Your mama picked that name before. Well, before everything happened. She said every child deserves justice in this world, deserves people who'll fight for them. His voice cracked. I'm gonna fight for you, little man. Even though you're not mine by blood, you're mine now. Your mama's mine too, even if she doesn't know it yet. Denise cleared her throat softly. Jerome turned and she saw the full weight of the night in his eyes. Exhaustion, fear, hope, and something that looked like forgiveness already taking root. Ms. Washington Price? Jerome stood quickly, confusion crossing his face. What are you doing here? I came to... Denise stopped. What had she come to do? Apologize? Offer her job back? Make herself feel better about the choice she'd made? I came to see if you needed anything. Jerome looked back at the baby, then at her. You fired me. Yes. Because I missed work taking care of my daughter when she had pneumonia. Yes. And now you're here because I saved my ex-wife? Denise felt heat rise in her cheeks. It sounds terrible when you put it like that. It is terrible, Jerome said, but his voice was gentle. But you know what? I'm not angry anymore. I can't be angry when I'm looking at this baby fighting for his life. When I'm thinking about Simone lying in that bed, wondering if she'll wake up. He turned back to the incubator. I learned something tonight. People make mistakes. Sometimes they run when they should stay. Sometimes they fire good employees because they're scared of looking weak. Sometimes they choose money over love. He looked at Denise again. But sometimes they get chances to make it right. In the reflection of the incubator glass, Denise saw herself clearly for the first time in years. She saw a woman who had worked so hard to prove she belonged in boardrooms that she'd forgotten what it meant to belong in her own community. What can I do? She asked. The baby's going to need surgery. Multiple surgeries. Simone's going to need physical therapy, maybe reconstructive surgery for her burns. Neither of them has insurance that'll cover all of this. Denise nodded slowly. What else? Simone's going to need time to heal. She's going to need help. She's going to need people who won't run when things get difficult. Jerome's voice was steady, but Denise could see the pain underneath. She's going to need to remember that not everyone leaves. Through the glass, baby Justice wrapped his impossibly tiny fingers around Jerome's finger. The monitors showed his heart rate stabilizing. I'll make sure she has everything she needs, Denise said. I'll make sure they both do. Even though you fired me? Especially because I fired you. Amara Carter pressed her nose against the hospital window, watching the parking lot for any sign of her father's old Honda. She'd been staying with her grandmother for 3 days, and nobody would tell her exactly what was happening except that Mama Simone got hurt and Daddy's taking care of her. At 8 years old, Amara understood more than adults gave her credit for. She knew Mama Simone had left them to marry a rich man. She knew her father cried sometimes when he thought she was sleeping. She knew the bills piled up on the kitchen table, and she knew why her father had started walking to job interviews instead of driving. But she also knew that her father still kept Mama Simone's favorite tea in the kitchen cabinet, even though she'd been gone for 6 months. Baby girl, come eat your breakfast. Grandma Rose called from the kitchen. Your daddy's gonna call soon. Amara dragged herself away from the window and climbed onto the kitchen chair. Grandma Rose had made pancakes, but they sat untouched on the plate. Everything felt wrong without her father's morning routine, the way he'd braid her hair while she ate, the way he'd quiz her on spelling words, the way he'd promise her that everything would be okay even when it obviously wasn't. The phone rang. Daddy? Amara grabbed the phone before her grandmother could answer. Hey, sweetheart. Jerome's voice sounded tired, but she could hear him smiling. How's my girl? When can I see you? When can I see Mama Simone? There was a pause. Amara had learned to read her father's pauses. This one meant he was trying to figure out how to tell her something difficult without making her more worried. Mama Simone is really sick, baby. She was in an accident, and she has to stay in the hospital for a while so the doctors can help her get better. But she's going to be okay? She's going to be okay. And Amara, there's something else. Mama Simone had her baby. You have a little brother. Amara's heart jumped. A brother? Is he okay too? He's really little. So little that he has to stay in a special room with machines to help him breathe and eat. But he's fighting hard, just like you do when you don't want to go to bed. that made Amara giggle even though she wanted to cry. What's his name? Justice. Justice Carter? Another pause. Well, sweetheart, that's complicated. Justice's daddy is someone else. But I'm going to take care of him anyway because that's what family does. Amara thought about this. She'd seen kids at school with complicated families, step-parents, half-siblings, people who loved each other even when they weren't related by blood. Her teacher, Mrs. Thompson, always said family was about who showed up, not who shared DNA. Can I come see them? Please? Tomorrow, Jerome promised. But Amara, I need you to understand something. Mama Simone might look different. She got hurt in the fire and she might have bandages and things that look scary. But underneath all that, she's still the same person who taught you how to braid friendship bracelets and lets you put extra marshmallows in hot chocolate. I'm not scared, Amara said and meant it. I want to help take care of them. That evening, Denise Washington Price sat in her empty penthouse apartment, staring at Jerome Carter's employment file. She'd pulled it from HR after leaving the hospital, thinking she wanted to understand what she'd missed about him. What she found made her stomach turn. Jerome had perfect attendance for 2 years straight until his daughter got pneumonia. He'd worked overtime without complaint, filled in for other guards, never asked for special treatment. His supervisor reviews were glowing. The only mark against him was missing 4 days of work while his daughter was hospitalized. 4 days that Denise had turned into a firing offense because she was trying to prove to the board that she could make tough decisions. She picked up her phone and called David Henderson, the company owner who'd hired her 2 years ago to bring some efficiency to the operation. Denise? It's late. What's going on? David, I need to ask you about our family leave policies. Our what? Family leave. Sick days for when employees' children are ill. Emergency time off for family crises. David sighed. Denise, you know we can't afford to carry employees who can't show up consistently. We've talked about this. Have you ever had a child in the hospital, David? What does that have to do with anything? Denise looked out at the Atlanta skyline, all those lights representing families tucked into homes, taking care of each other. Everything, she said. It has to do with everything. She hung up and dialed another number. Jerome? It's Denise Washington Price. I know it's late, but I need to ask you something. When you come back to work, and you are coming back to work, what would you need from us to make this easier? There was silence on the other end. Ms. Washington Price, I don't understand. I'm offering you your job back. With a raise. And I'm asking what our company could do better to support employees who are also parents. You're serious. Dead serious. What do you need? Jerome was quiet for a long moment. Flexible hours during medical emergencies. A way to make up missed shifts instead of losing pay. Maybe childcare assistance for single parents working late shifts. Done. What else? Insurance that actually covers pediatric care. Simone's going to need physical therapy, and Justice is looking at months in the NICU. I'll handle the insurance personally. What else? Why are you doing this? Denise looked at her reflection in the window. Because tonight I learned the difference between being efficient and being human. And I haven't been human in a very long time. 3 weeks after the accident, Simone Carter opened her eyes in the ICU to find Jerome asleep in the chair beside her bed, holding their son. Not their son, her son with David, the man who'd left her to burn. But Jerome was holding Justice like he was precious cargo, whispering to him about his big sister Amara, who was waiting to meet him. Jerome? Simone's voice came out as a croak. Her throat felt like she'd swallowed gravel. Jerome startled awake, careful not to jostle the baby. Hey, he said softly. Welcome back. Simone tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. Everything hurt. Her arms, her legs, her chest, her heart. The baby? Justice is doing better. He's off the ventilator as of yesterday. Breathing on his own. Jerome's voice was full of pride, like he'd helped teach the baby how to breathe. Dr. Mills says he's a fighter. Where's David? The question hung in the air between them like smoke. Jerome looked down at Justice, then back at Simone. He didn't make it to the hospital. Simone closed her eyes. She remembered now. Remembered David looking back at the burning car, remembered him running away instead of toward her. The man she'd chosen over Jerome, the man she'd thought would give her security, had left her to die. I'm sorry, Jerome said quietly. I know you loved him. Did I? Simone's voice was barely a whisper. Or did I just love what I thought he represented? Safety. Security. A big house and a nice car. She looked at Jerome, really looked at him. His shirt was wrinkled, His eyes were red with exhaustion, but he was here. He'd been here for 3 weeks, taking care of a child who wasn't his, watching over a woman who'd divorced him for another man. "Why didn't you leave me?" "Because," Jerome said, adjusting Justice in his arms, "when you love someone you don't leave them burning." Down the hall in the administrative offices, Denise Washington Price was having a very different conversation with David Henderson. She'd called an emergency board meeting, and the conference room was full of uncomfortable executives who'd been pulled away from their Friday evening plans. "Let me make sure I understand this," David said, loosening his tie. "You want to implement paid family leave, expand our health insurance coverage, and hire Jerome Carter back at a higher salary level, all because he rescued someone from a car accident?" "I want to do those things because they're the right thing to do," Denise said. "Jerome Carter's story just helped me realize how far we've fallen from being a company that supports its employees." Board member Patricia Klein spoke up. "Denise, I understand this situation has been emotional for everyone, but we have shareholders to consider. These benefits you're proposing will cost us significantly. You know what costs us more? Turnover. We spend more money training new employees than we'd ever spend on family leave policies. We spend more on recruitment than we would on supporting the good people we already have." "But the Carter situation is an outlier," David said. "We can't make company policy based on one dramatic incident." Denise pulled out a folder she'd been preparing for weeks. "Jerome Carter isn't an outlier. In the past year, we've terminated 12 employees for family-related absences. 12 people who had sick children, elderly parents, family emergencies. We've lost some of our best workers because we prioritized perfect attendance over human decency." She stood up, commanding the room. "I've been your CEO for 2 years. I've increased profits by 30% by cutting costs and eliminating what I called inefficiencies. But those inefficiencies were people. Parents, caregivers, people who had lives outside of this building." The room was quiet. Denise continued. 3 weeks ago, one of the men I fired risked his life to save someone else. While we were here debating profit margins, he was running into a burning car to rescue his ex-wife. That's the kind of character we fired because he missed work to take care of his sick daughter." David shifted uncomfortably. "What are you proposing?" "I'm proposing that we become the kind of company that people are proud to work for. I'm proposing family leave, flexible scheduling for parents, emergency childcare assistance, and expanded healthcare coverage." She looked around the room. "I'm proposing that we lead by example instead of following the crowd." "And if the board doesn't approve these changes?" Denise smiled, but it wasn't entirely friendly. "Then you'll be looking for a new CEO. Because I won't run a company that would fire Jerome Carter twice." The vote was unanimous. Amara Carter had always been small for her age, but standing next to her baby brother's incubator, she felt enormous. Justice was so tiny that his whole hand could wrap around just one of her fingers, but he held on tight when she touched him through the holes in the plastic. "He knows you're his big sister," Jerome said, watching Amara lean over the incubator, talking to Justice in the special voice she reserved for babies and puppies. "Hi, Justice. I'm Amara. I'm your big sister, and I'm gonna teach you everything. I'm gonna teach you how to ride a bike and how to make pancakes and how to tell when Daddy's worried about money so we can give him extra hugs." Simone watched from her wheelchair, her arms still bandaged but healing. The physical therapy was working, and Dr. Mills said the burns would fade to scars that would barely be visible in a few years. But Simone knew some scars went deeper than skin. "Amara," Simone said softly. The little girl turned, and for a moment, Simone saw wariness in those 8-year-old eyes. Simone had hurt this family. She'd left them, chosen someone else, disrupted the life Amara had known. "Can we talk?" Amara looked at her father, who nodded encouragingly. She walked over to Simone's wheelchair, her hands behind her back in that shy way she had when she was trying to be brave. "I owe you an apology," Simone said. "A big one. For leaving us?" The directness of 8-year-old honesty hit Simone like a physical blow. "Yes. For leaving you and your daddy. For thinking that money and a big house were more important than the family we had." Amara considered this. "Daddy said you were trying to find a better life. Your daddy is kind. The truth is I was scared. I was scared that we didn't have enough money, that I couldn't give you the things you deserved. So I chose someone I thought could give us more." Simone's voice broke. "But I learned that having more things doesn't matter if the person you're with leaves you when you need them most. Are you going to leave again?" The question hung in the air. Simone looked at Jerome, who was pretending to be completely absorbed in adjusting Justice's blanket, giving them space for this conversation but staying close enough to catch them if they fell. "I don't know what's going to happen," Simone said honestly. Your daddy and I aren't married anymore. And Justice's daddy, he's not going to be part of our lives. But Amara, I promise you this, I will never leave you or Justice when you need me. Even if your daddy and I can't figure out how to be married again, I will always be part of your family. Amara studied her face with the intensity that children reserve for deciding whether adults are telling the truth. You promise? I promise. Amara nodded solemnly, then stepped forward and carefully hugged Simone around the neck, avoiding her bandaged arms. I missed you, Mama Simone. I missed you too, baby girl. That afternoon, Denise Washington Price arrived at the hospital carrying a stack of legal documents and a determination that had been building for weeks. She found Jerome in the family waiting area, filling out insurance forms while Amara colored pictures for Justice's room. Jerome, I need to talk to you about something important, Denise said, sitting down across from him. It's about Justice's medical bills. Jerome's shoulders tensed. I know they're going to be extensive. I'm working on it. No, you don't understand. Henderson and Associates is going to cover them. All of them. Justice's NICU stay, Simone's surgery and therapy, everything. Jerome stared at her. Ms. Washington Price, that's got to be hundreds of thousands of dollars. Try $500,000 minimum. Denise set the papers on the table. The board approved it unanimously. We're also implementing the family leave policies we discussed, and we're starting a foundation to help employees during medical emergencies. I don't understand. Why? Denise looked at Amara, who had stopped coloring and was listening intently. Because that little girl shouldn't have to worry about whether her family can afford to keep her baby brother alive. Because you shouldn't have to choose between being at this hospital and keeping your job. Because a company that can't support its employees during their worst moments doesn't deserve to exist. She pulled out another set of papers. There's something else. I want to offer you a position as our Director of Employee Relations. You'd be responsible for making sure no other single parent goes through what you went through. You'd help create policies that support working families. Jerome looked at the job offer, then at Amara, who had climbed down from her chair and was looking at the papers over his shoulder. What's that mean, Daddy? Amara asked. It means, Jerome said slowly, that Ms. Washington Price wants me to help make sure other daddies don't get fired when their little girls get sick. That's a good job, Amara said definitively. You should take it. Jerome looked at Denise. The salary is triple what you were making as a security guard, plus full family health coverage and flexible hours for family emergencies. I don't have a college degree. You have something better. You have integrity, compassion, and first-hand experience with the problems we need to solve. Denise leaned forward. Jerome, I spent 2 years trying to make this company more efficient. You spent one night showing me what it means to be effective. There's a difference. Jerome looked down at the papers again, then at his daughter, who was nodding at him encouragingly. What would my first project be? Designing a childcare program for employees working late shifts. Making sure no parent has to choose between being with their sick child and keeping their job. Creating support systems for single parents. Denise smiled. Making sure that when the next Jerome Carter comes along, we see their strength instead of their challenges. I accept, Jerome said. Amara cheered and threw her arms around her father's neck. Now can we go tell Mama Simone and Justice the good news? 6 weeks after the accident, Justice Carter came home from the hospital weighing 5 pounds and 4 ounces, with lungs strong enough to make his feelings known to the entire neighborhood. Jerome carried the car seat into the house he'd bought with his first paycheck as Director of Employee Relations. Not a mansion but a real home with a yard where Amara could play and a nursery where Justice could grow. Simone followed behind him, still moving carefully but no longer needing the wheelchair. The physical scars on her arms had faded to pale lines that looked like silver threads in the sunlight. The emotional scars were harder to see but ran deeper. He's really ours? Amara asked, peering into the car seat where Justice was making small, sleepy sounds. I mean really ours to keep? Really, Jerome confirmed, though the legal paperwork was complicated. David had never officially terminated his parental rights, but he'd also never appeared at the hospital, never called, never shown any interest in the son who'd nearly died. Jerome's lawyer said it would be easy to argue abandonment, but Jerome wasn't sure he wanted to put Simone through a custody battle with a man who'd left her burning. Simone had been staying in the guest room since her discharge from the hospital, helping with Justice's care while she recovered. It was a temporary arrangement that felt increasingly permanent as the days passed. They moved around each other carefully, like dancers learning new choreography, finding their rhythm as co-parents if not as husband and wife. I made his room perfect, Amara announced, leading them down the hall. She'd spent hours arranging and rearranging Justice's nursery, making sure he had the softest blankets, the most interesting mobile, and a collection of stuffed animals that could protect him from bad dreams. The room was painted a soft green, with clouds on the ceiling and a border of animals that Amara had chosen. It was nothing like the elaborate nursery Simone had planned in David's mansion. This was better. This was made with love instead of money. "It's perfect," Simone said, her voice thick with emotion. They settled Justice into his crib, all three of them hovering over him like he might disappear if they looked away. He stretched his tiny arms above his head and yawned, completely unaware that his mere existence had changed everything for the people who loved him. That evening, after Amara had gone to bed and Justice had settled into his first night at home, Simone and Jerome found themselves in the kitchen, sharing the cleanup duties with the comfortable efficiency of people who'd done this dance before in another life. "Jerome," Simone said, drying the last of the baby bottles. "We need to talk about what happens next." Jerome's hands stilled in the soapy water. "What do you mean?" "I mean we can't keep pretending this is temporary. I'm living in your house, we're raising a baby together, Amara calls me Mama Simone like I never left." She set down the dish towel and turned to face him. "But we're not married. We're not even dating. We're just, what are we, Jerome?" Jerome dried his hands slowly, buying time. The truth was, he'd fallen in love with Simone all over again, watching her with Justice, seeing her teach Amara how to hold the baby properly, listening to her sing lullabies in the middle of the night. But she'd chosen someone else once. What guarantee did he have that she wouldn't do it again? "We're a family," Jerome said finally. "Maybe not a traditional one, but we're a family." "Are we?" "Because families make commitments to each other. They don't live in limbo, wondering if the other person is going to change their mind and leave." The words hit Jerome harder than he expected. "Like you left." Simone flinched. "Yes, like I left. Jerome, I made the biggest mistake of my life when I divorced you. I let fear make my decisions. I chose security over love, money over family, and it nearly got me killed." Her voice cracked. "David left me burning in that car. You ran toward the fire. So what are you saying?" "I'm saying I want to earn my way back into this family. Not as a guest in your house, not as Justice's mother who happens to be helping out. I want to be your wife again if you'll have me." Jerome stared at her. "Simone. I know I hurt you. I know I hurt Amara. I know trust is something that has to be rebuilt, not just promised." Simone stepped closer. "But Jerome, I love you. I never stopped loving you. I just forgot for a while that love is braver than fear." Before Jerome could respond, they heard Justice crying from the nursery. Simone moved toward the sound automatically, and Jerome followed. They stood over the crib together, Simone lifting Justice while Jerome rubbed the baby's back, both of them humming softly until he settled. "Look at us," Simone whispered. "We're already doing this together." Jerome looked at his ex-wife holding a baby that wasn't his, in a house he'd bought with money from a job he'd gotten because he'd saved her life. It was messy and complicated and nothing like the fairy tale endings in Amara's storybooks. It was perfect. "Okay," Jerome said quietly. Okay, let's figure out how to be a family again. But Simone, this isn't just about us. Amara's been hurt too. And Justice is going to grow up hearing this story. We have to be sure." "I'm sure," Simone said, then corrected herself. "I'm scared and sure and determined and hopeful and terrified all at the same time. But I'm more sure about this than I've ever been about anything." Jerome reached out and touched Justice's tiny hand, then covered Simone's hand with his own. "Then let's do this. Let's be a family." 3 months later, Denise Washington Price stood at the podium in the Henderson and Associates Conference Center, looking out at an audience of employees, board members, and local community leaders. The company's first annual Family Support Gala was exceeding all expectations, but Denise was nervous about the speech she was about to give. Behind her, a screen displayed photos from the company's new family support programs: the on-site childcare center, the emergency family leave fund, the flexible scheduling options that were helping dozens of parents balance work and family responsibilities. "When I became CEO of this company 2 years ago," Denise began, "I thought success meant cutting costs and increasing efficiency. I thought the best way to run a business was to eliminate anything that seemed like a weakness or a liability." In the audience, Jerome sat with Simone, Amara, and baby Justice, who had grown into a chunky 6-month-old with his father's eyes and his mother's stubborn chin. They'd remarried 2 weeks ago in a small ceremony in their backyard, with Amara as the flower girl and Justice as the world's youngest ring bearer. "I was wrong," Denise continued. I learned that a company's strength doesn't come from eliminating human complications. It comes from embracing them. It comes from understanding that our employees are whole people with families, challenges, dreams and responsibilities that extend far beyond these walls. She clicked to the next slide, showing a photo of Jerome teaching a workplace safety seminar to new employees. 6 months ago, I fired Jerome Carter because he missed work to care for his sick daughter. It was, I thought, a simple business decision. Unreliable employees couldn't be tolerated. The audience was quiet, focused. Denise had never been one to admit mistakes publicly, but tonight was different. That same night, Jerome Carter risked his life to save someone from a burning car. Not because it was his job, I'd taken his job away. Not because he expected recognition or reward. He did it because when you see someone in trouble, you help them. That's who Jerome Carter is. She paused, looking directly at Jerome's family. The person he saved was his ex-wife, who was pregnant with another man's child. The man who should have saved her, the man she'd left Jerome for, ran away instead. But Jerome ran toward the fire. The click of her remote brought up a new image, the Henderson and Associates Child Care Center, full of laughing children and dedicated caregivers. Today, because of Jerome's example and his tireless work as our Director of Employee Relations, we have programs that support working parents, emergency funds for family crises, and policies that recognize that sometimes the most reliable employees are the ones who understand what it means to be responsible for other people. Applause rippled through the audience. Denise waited for it to settle. But this isn't really a story about corporate policy or employee benefits. This is a story about what happens when we choose love over fear, community over competition, and second, a sick daughter and a broken heart. Now he was being offered the chance to help other families avoid the pain his had endured. I think, Jerome said slowly, that sometimes the worst things that happen to us become the foundation for the best things we ever do. 2 years after the fire, Simone Carter stood in the law offices of Peterson, Clark and Associates, signing the final papers that would legally change Justice's last name from Henderson to Carter. David Henderson had finally agreed to terminate his parental rights, not out of generosity, but because his own legal troubles had made him eager to sever any connections to his past life. Jerome sat beside her, holding 2-year-old Justice, who was more interested in the lawyer's fancy pen than the legal proceedings that were making Jerome his official father. "Daddy," Justice said clearly, reaching for Jerome's face with sticky fingers. It was one of his favorite words, along with Mama, Mara, his version of Amara, and No, which he used with the frequency of most 2-year-olds. "That's right, buddy," Jerome said, kissing Justice's forehead. "I'm your daddy." Amara, now 10 years old and wise beyond her years, sat in the corner reading while they handled the paperwork. She'd grown into her role as big sister with the seriousness of someone who understood that families were precious things that required careful tending. "All done," announced Mr. Peterson, the family lawyer. "Justice Carter is now legally your son, Jerome. The adoption is complete." Outside the law office, the Carter family celebrated with ice cream and a trip to the park where Justice could run around and burn off the energy he'd stored up during the boring legal meeting. Amara pushed him on the baby swings while Jerome and Simone sat on a nearby bench, watching their children and marveling at how normal this felt. "Remember when we used to bring Amara here when she was little?" Simone asked, leaning against Jerome's shoulder. "You mean back when we thought we knew what we were doing?" Jerome laughed. "When we thought parenting came with an instruction manual? We were so young," Simone said. "So sure that love was enough to solve everything. Wasn't it?" Simone considered this. Love was enough to bring us back together. But it took forgiveness to make us stronger. And wisdom to help us stay together this time. They watched Amara teaching Justice how to pump his legs on the swing, her patience with her little brother endless and genuine. "Speaking of staying together," Jerome said, pulling an envelope from his jacket pocket. "Denise gave me this today." Simone opened the envelope to find plane tickets. 4 of them to Barbados for a family vacation that would be their first real trip together as a complete family. "Jerome, this is too much." "It's not from me." "Well, not entirely." The Carter Family Foundation board voted to give the director and his family a week off after 2 years of non-stop work helping other families. Jerome grinned. "Apparently they think I need a vacation." "Do you?" Jerome looked at his wife, his children, his life that had been rebuilt from the ashes of betrayal and abandonment into something stronger than it had ever been before. "I need time with my family without thinking about anyone else's crisis. I need to see you in a bathing suit again. I need to watch Amara teach Justice how to build sandcastles." "When do we leave?" "Next month. Amara's spring break." Simone kissed him, right there in the park where other parents were chasing their own children, where teenagers were playing basketball and elderly couples were feeding ducks. It was a perfectly ordinary moment made extraordinary by the fact that they'd almost lost the chance to have any more ordinary moments. "Mama. Daddy. Look." Amara called from the playground. She'd convinced Justice to go down the slide by himself, a big milestone for a cautious 2-year-old who preferred to have his big sister's steadying hand for new adventures. They rushed over to watch Justice's triumphant solo slide, cheering like he'd just won the Olympics. Justice beamed with pride, immediately climbing the ladder to go again. "Again. Again," he shouted, his favorite phrase after Daddy and no. As the sun set over the playground and they gathered their things to head home, Simone thought about the woman she'd been 3 years ago, scared, insecure, choosing money over love because she thought security came from external things. That woman had nearly died in a burning car, abandoned by the man she'd thought would save her. But she'd been saved anyway. By the man she'd left behind, the man who ran toward fire instead of away from it, the man who'd rebuilt their family from nothing because he understood that some things were worth fighting for. "Ready to go home?" Jerome asked, lifting Justice onto his shoulders while Amara grabbed Simone's hand. "Ready," Simone said, though she knew now that home wasn't a place. It was these people, this love, this commitment to showing up for each other no matter what. As they walked back to their car, Justice babbled happily from his perch on Jerome's shoulders. Amara chattered about her plans for their beach vacation, and Simone realized that this ordinary evening with her extraordinary family, was everything she'd been searching for when she'd made all those wrong choices. Sometimes you had to lose everything to understand what you'd had all along. 5 years after the fire, Amara Carter stood at the front of her 8th grade graduation ceremony, preparing to give the valedictorian speech she'd written about second chances and the families we choose. In the audience, Jerome, Simone, and 5-year-old Justice sat in the front row, beaming with pride. "Families," Amara began, her voice steady and confident, "don't always look like the pictures in storybooks. Sometimes they're broken apart and put back together with different pieces. Sometimes they're held together by people who aren't related by blood but are connected by something stronger, the choice to love each other no matter what." Justice, dressed in his best shirt and tie, sat perfectly still during his sister's speech, understanding that this was an important moment even if he couldn't quite follow all the big words. 5 years ago my family went through something terrible. My parents were divorced. My stepmom chose someone else over us. My dad got fired from his job. We didn't have much money and we didn't know how everything was going to work out. In the audience, Simone reached for Jerome's hand. They talked to Amara about whether she wanted to include their family story in her speech, and she'd insisted it was important for other kids to hear that families could survive hard times. But sometimes the worst things that happen to us lead to the best things. Because of what our family went through, my dad now helps other families when they're in crisis. Because my stepmom almost lost everything, she learned what really matters. Because my little brother was born during the hardest time, he became the thing that brought us all back together. Justice whispered loudly, "She's talking about me," and the audience chuckled. "I learned that second chances aren't just about forgiving other people," Amara continued. "They're about forgiving ourselves for the mistakes we make, and believing that we can do better next time. My family got a second chance and we didn't waste it." The applause was thunderous. As Amara walked back to her seat, Jerome wiped away tears he hadn't expected to shed. Simone was crying too, overwhelmed by pride in the young woman who'd navigated their family's crisis with wisdom beyond her years. After the ceremony, the Carter family gathered in their backyard for a graduation party that had grown to include dozens of people. Colleagues from Henderson and Associates, families they'd helped through the Carter Family Foundation, friends from Amara's school, and neighbors who'd become like extended family over the years. Denise Washington Price, now a close family friend who never missed Justice's birthday parties or Amara's school events, raised her glass for a toast. To Amara Carter, Denise said, "who taught us all that wisdom doesn't come with age, it comes with experience, reflection, and the courage to speak truth." And to the Carter family, who showed a hard-hearted CEO that the best businesses are built on the foundation of strong families. To second chances, someone called out and the entire party raised their glasses. Later that evening, after the last guest had gone home and the dishes were cleaned, the Carter family sat on their back porch watching Justice chase fireflies in the yard. Amara was reading a book about marine biology. She wanted to be an ocean scientist when she grew up, inspired by her interest in how ecosystems recovered from disasters. "Can I tell you something?" Simone said, breaking the comfortable silence. "Always," Jerome replied. Sometimes I still can't believe this is my life. That we're here all together after everything that happened. Do you ever regret it? Jerome asked. The path that led us here? All the pain we had to go through to get to this. Simone considered the question seriously. She thought about the woman she'd been, the one who'd chosen security over love, money over family, fear over faith. She thought about the terror of being trapped in that burning car, the months of recovery, the hard work of rebuilding trust and forgiveness. I regret that I hurt you and Amara, she said finally. I regret that Justice had to be born under such traumatic circumstances. I regret that it took almost losing everything for me to understand what I had. Justice ran up to them, his jar full of fireflies blinking like tiny stars. But, Simone continued, I don't regret where we ended up. I don't regret that Justice brought us back together. I don't regret that our story helped other families. And I don't regret that we learned how strong we really are. Look. Justice opened his jar and let the fireflies go, watching them dance back into the night sky. They're going home to their families too. Jerome picked up his son and settled him on his lap. That's right, buddy. Everyone needs to go home to their families. Are we always going to be a family? Justice asked with the earnestness of a 5-year-old who'd heard enough of his family's story to worry that people sometimes left. Always, Amara said firmly, looking up from her book. We're the kind of family that stays together no matter what. Promise? Justice asked. Promise, said Jerome, Simone, and Amara in unison. As the evening settled around them and the fireflies danced in their yard, the Carter family sat together in the comfortable silence of people who'd been through fire and came out stronger. They'd learned that love wasn't just a feeling, it was a choice you made every day. They'd learned that families could be broken and mended, that trust could be lost and rebuilt, and that sometimes the greatest gifts came wrapped in the ugliest packages. Most importantly, they'd learned that when someone you love is burning, you don't run away. You run toward the fire.